dated back in history, the toilet was only reserved for kings and cripples. And like anything, we begin to idolize kings, and then it becomes part of modern culture. We want to poop like the king. And that's now led to a global crisis where things like hemorrhoids, colorectal cancer, and so forth. And you can kind of look at charts over time. There's a correlation with, colorectal issues and the modern toilet. We're in like this hustle culture, rush society where the only time that we ever go to the bathroom is when it's like about to be a blowout or some type of massive emergent event. And we don't facilitate using the restroom like we would, as you described earlier, in a primal setting. Or you're outside, you're squatting down, birds are chirping, sun's shining, there's trees around. So I think we've really kind of gotten off track with it.
Well, my guest and I were just shooting the shit before this podcast about how this threatens to be the shittiest podcast that I've ever done. Right, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, I really appreciate you bringing me on the show. You've built up this entire audience and this entire reputation to bring me on today to just really crap the bed, if you will.
Yeah, I can't wait to shoot the shit. Folks, don't worry. This isn't going to be a total potty mouth podcast, but this book that I'm holding up, Toilet Yoga, Biohack Your Bowel Movement. I should probably make sure there's no brown stains or anything on the coat because I actually have had this up by my toilet for good reason. This is like one of the most practical guides that I've ever read about things we aren't taught, like growing up. Like, I don't know about you, Derek, but my mom or my dad or anybody else, any teacher never taught me, like, here's how you sit on the toilet. Here's how you are actually supposed to, properly perch yourself for proper colorectal angle. Here's what to do if you're constipated beyond just taking a bunch of psyllium husk or something like that. And this book just it's kind of like breath work, right? When I discovered breath work, I'm like, why didn't I learn this when I was a kid? Your book kind of reminded me of that as well. So I want to get into toilet yoga and everything that went into creating this book. But for those of you not familiar with Derek, Derek Norsworthy is his last name, Derek Norsworthy. And I will link to everything, including his bio and his information, if you go to bengreenfieldlife.com/toilet yoga. But Derek is an author. He's an athlete. He's an entrepreneur. He's obviously a health enthusiast, obsessed with pooping. I actually met Derek through music. He had given me some tips about playing my guitar and singing online. That was how I originally met him. I later found out he was involved with health. But Derek, can you tell your story about how you got kind of involved, not specifically with toilets, but just with health and physical culture in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the kind intro, Ben. And it's funny how you go from music to the toilet, and I can maybe paint all that really quickly here. But I do have a background in music. I was 2018 Mississippi Songwriter of the Year. You spent a lot of time in Nashville working in the music industry. Now a governor for the Grammy organization for the Recording Academy. So had a pretty solid background in music and entrepreneurship. And sometime around the time of like 2018, while I was a healthy guy, just kind of got into what I would know now is called fit sick. I was out, running, training, doing all the things right, and discovered that I had a form of adrenal fatigue, low testosterone, and so forth. And that was initially what led me to the toilet. Was I just had my gut was just shut down on me, and I would be in the bathroom looking for these ways to feel like I could just defecate, if you will, and was unable to do it. So what that led me to do is to start trying to find movements and routines on the toilet that could actually help me get things out of my body to heal. And the more I started doing that over like a 2-year period, I started saying, you know what, I'm onto something here. And I can walk through some steps as we work through of how that, began to evolve. But that was the initial thing, just, in the music business, working really hard as an entrepreneur, got myself into a little bout of adrenal fatigue from overtraining, undersleeping, and just a product of hustle culture, if you will. And it brought me right down, not to my knees, but very close to it, crouched on the toilet.
Some people involved in hustle culture hard charging high achievers. You and I probably fall into that category. They have toilet issues just because they don't give themselves the time to go to the bathroom. It's like, hey, I got 5 minutes, got to make it happen and reply to 10 emails while I'm trying to do this. But for other people, it goes deeper than that. You mentioned adrenal fatigue, and I want to get into that and the link between that, or the proposed link between that and constipation, because, I know thyroid issues can cause it. And obviously, diet is a major factor here. But for me personally, when I've struggled with it in the past, I didn't have any issues at all with going to the bathroom until I think I was 24 years old, and I had a bike accident where I hit my tailbone really hard. And then later that year, I also sustained a hip injury to the outside of my hip, again, sliding off the bike. This was back when I was racing triathlon. And my hips at that point were something that gave me trouble. I had a lot of doctors tell me I had sacroiliac joint issues, low back issues, a little bit of L5-S1 disc degradation. And I think as a result of that, I developed kind of a tight pelvic floor musculature that wouldn't release. Some people will have that, for example, both men and women, from something like, say, previous sexual trauma. But it could also be brought on by physical trauma. So in my case, I sustained some injuries that from about age 25 on left me really having to pay attention to my defecation positions. And fortunately, books like yours and other tactics I've learned have helped me to learn how to breathe and relax the pelvic floor musculature. But for me, it was very anatomical. For you with the adrenal fatigue thing, what exactly is the link there between adrenal fatigue and pushing yourself too hard and constipation?
Yeah, well, if I were to fast forward now to know what was kind of driving the adrenal fatigue, it was mold and heavy metals, which kind of gets us back into our detox. The whole idea of the book is that we live in a world that's just fumigated with environmental toxins. And I think, with the recent election, everything going on with RFK, that it's, pretty much national news now that we live in a toxic soup from an environmental standpoint. But about 3 years into that, after I, started to learn how to, do things on my own to get my body to detox, I found that I had very high mercury levels, very high mold levels. Even working through our friends at Wild Health, found out that my methylation was not optimal. So kind of creating the perfect storm, if you will, around that particular piece. And to go back to something you said earlier about when we're taught to poop, as I start to reflect back on this, for me it was a lot like what you said, is that anytime, like, we view pooping in our society as an emergency. Like when you're little, you go grab your mom's arm, or you go grab your teacher at school, and you go, "Oh, hey, I have an emergency." And to me, that's setting up just a chain of events in the body that's just putting a negative connotation towards something that we're actually designed to do from a primal aspect. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but specifically back to your question on adrenal fatigue, is that when a body is detoxing mold or heavy metals, you get what you call sticky poop. And I'm sure a lot of functional medicine doctors, a lot of your listeners out there are familiar with that. But as as all of these things come in from the body, from the bones, the fascia, and so forth, and come into the gut, which is where they're ultimately going to be removed from the body, it's not something that is normal to the body. So the body starts to kind of bring these different components around it, and it makes it where you can be either softly or hardly constipated. So I'm sure a little bit, dealing with gut issues, or even your clients who that you can even have very loose stool but be constipated, feel like you're incompletely emptying and so forth. But for me, a lot of that adrenal fatigue was the heavy metals. It was the mold that was driving that, kind of looking back on it now. And that was the link with adrenal fatigue.
Yeah, that's interesting about the loose stool also being associated with constipation. I see that in many cases in people with small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or something else that causes a high amount of, say, methane production by methanogenic bacteria in the gut, or sulfur-consuming bacteria in the gut, and a large amount of gas you'd think would kind of like cause stuff to get pushed out earlier. But paradoxically, that pressure can almost keep stuff inside. It's almost like a reverse pressure gradient. So you could, again, paradoxically have loose stool, but doesn't come out because of excess gas. And, SIBO is a very notorious cause of constipation, often solved by eliminating a lot of fermentable compounds from the diet, like, starchy carbs and wheat and onions and garlic and the like. But the sticky poop, that makes me think of that. What's the classic joke? What's brown and sticky? All the kids kind of start to snicker, and then the actual answer is a stick. But hopefully none of us are pooping sticks, depending on the fiber composition of our diet. But when it comes to this concept of toilet yoga, when did exploring that enter the scene for you?
It kind of came out of necessity. So the way it happened, it was kind of funny. Like, it was like kind of known that I was having some gut issues, and my sister popped up one Christmas with a Squatty Potty. And I thought, like, this is the craziest thing ever, like, a Squatty Potty. And I took it home, I put it together. Luckily, it was a wooden one, so it feels really nice on your feet. I think it's like bamboo maybe. And so that was when it all began, is when I actually started to get my body in its primal position. And then listening to my body. The body's highly intelligent, once you learn how to listen to it. And so once I initially had that aha moment with the Squatty Potty, I started to take on different positions, start to incorporate breathing and so forth. So that was the initial foundation for it. So shout out to my sister for bringing a Squatty Potty to Christmas. I don't even think that was like a dirty Santa or a gag gift. I think it was very intentional. So, your siblings know you best.
Yeah, I remember when I first got my first Squatty Potty, it was a game changer. The whole idea behind the puborectalis angle and how it tends to be kinked when our knees are not in a bent enough position, 90 degrees or less, preferably when taking a dump, is something that I just never come across before. Even down to doing a master's degree in physiology and biomechanics. It's just never described the actual angle that allows for ease of defecation and less straining. And yeah, when I first got a Squatty Potty and my knees were like propped up at about 80, 90 degrees or so, total game changer. And then, even though I don't take a Squatty Potty with me everywhere in the world, they make a travel version, but I travel so light, I can only pack so much. I still have the habit of, say, like dragging one of the spare waste containers from the hotel room into the bathroom and propping my feet up on that. Or even though I need to wash it afterwards, of course, just to be hygienic, I'll take like my small travel hard shell suitcase. And once I empty it, when I check into the hotel room or the Airbnb, I just make that my Squatty Potty for the trip. And, anybody who's taken a dump in the woods or maybe while camping or hunting kind of knows when you dig a hole or maybe, prop yourself up, next to a tree and hold onto the tree for support and kind of squat to poop, that stuff just comes out much more easily. And as a matter of fact, what drives me nuts, Derek, is how high they mount toilets in many homes and hotels these days, right? Your knees are at a very open, obtuse angle, and it really does not help with defecation at all. As a matter of fact, for this new home build that I have going on in Idaho right now, I specified a toilet height. I think it's at about 15, 16 inches or so, which allows for someone who's an average height of, say, like 6 foot to be able to sit on the toilet. And even in the absence of a Squatty Potty, have their knees at a proper angle that allows for that nice open, a puborectalis or colorectal angle, so that stuff just comes out more easily.
I completely agree with that. And I get to it in the book, like as children, we probably know how to do that. I mean, we squat down with a diaper and we just go to town. Like, my 18-month-old, like he put some stuff out like that. I think that most people would be really happy about it, but, and if you look at the length of the colon, like it's like, there's an image in the book where the colon is like almost as long as you are tall. And we start to look at people like John Wayne and Elvis, who they did the autopsies and they died with like 40 pounds of poop in them. Like, it just starts to really put it in context of how long over time does it take that to build up, and what were the factors that led to that. And to my, from my knowledge and my whole pooping journey, it comes up very much from when you take the body out of its primal position to do that type of, that it doesn't perform as well. And, another thing is like, I started trying to track back. I'm like, okay, we're potty trained as children to start to take on this weird position of sitting up at this almost like slide off forward angle, and we should actually be, like you said, the knee should be up for the pectoralics, for the rectal muscle, and but toilets were designed for kings and cripples initially, which is crazy.
What'd you just say? They were designed for kings and cripples?
Yep. So I went on a complete journey. It's like everybody started thinking like, hey, I'm like, there's gonna think like there's this weird guy who's doing these, who actually travels with a squatty potty, and only because I have like, almost fell off the toilet by some of those hotel bin things. You've probably done this, Ben, but like I've drug them up there before I bought the travel squatty potty and got my feet all up on it, and went to lean over in some toilet yoga position. It slides out, hits the wall. I mean, so it's a very interesting thing. But yeah,
before you go into the history of the toilet, I've done the same thing. Matter of fact, I had one time, because if I don't have a squatty potty or nothing to kind of like prop I'll just perch on the toilet seat. You've probably done this before, right? You just kind of, you perch on the toilet seat, and it works pretty well. But I had one place I was staying at, and this is so bad. I felt so bad. I perched on the toilet seat. The toilet seat broke while I'm taking a dump. This is a nasty story. So the toilet seat broke. I go flying halfway across the bathroom. Poop's still coming out of my butt. And it took me like 20 minutes to make a half-assed, pun intended, I suppose, in this point, attempt to actually clean up the bathroom. So you got to be make sure the toilet seat is screwed on properly if you're going to use the perching effect, because there's nothing that sucks like an injury while you're trying to defecate and a broken bathroom toilet at the same time. But anyways, back to the kings and cripples. I'm intrigued.
Well, I'll have to make you feel not so bad on that. So, I mean, you're exactly right. And it goes back to our primal urge. Like we're not just like weird people that like, oh, let's go perch on this toilet. Like our bodies are saying like, this is probably the best position I should get in right now. So we're just kind of following that urge. And it's also really funny, like if you're in an airport or something, you have to go, I try not to go poop in airports because obvious reasons, but like you drop your backpack down and someone comes in cleaning the bathroom and they don't see anything. You're just like almost like hovering, if you will. They don't see any feet. So they're gotta watch the doors there. I've done that before too.
Same thing has happened to me, dude. Like I perch. I like when I go to the bathroom, honestly, most of the times in the airport, step one is I take the dude wipes out of my backpack. I take out a dude wipe. I wipe down the toilet seat really, really well. And then it's actually very difficult to perch on a toilet seat with your pants on. So I hang my pants from the little hanger that they actually have in most bathrooms. And then I get up on the toilet seat and perch and do my thing. But yeah, you don't want to know how many times people try the door and try to figure out how to get in there and knock and like shake the rattle the door trying to enter the bathroom because they think nobody's in there.
Absolutely. I even have to take my shoes off too, because I really haven't, I've gotten used to noticing now the pressure on my feet and the way it really helps me. So I can be in and out of there quicker if I just completely just undress myself, go fully primal, hang up on the door and go to town.
Totally. Yeah. Shoes off, because you have to take your shoes off, take your pants off anyways. And then, clean the toilet seat and perch. I do the same thing.
Yeah. And I wear the earth runners a lot of times. So sometimes I'll the earth runners can kind of, they're a little more agile in those settings. So depending on the quality and the cleanliness of the place. But yeah, it's, shoes off is always the preference.
Yeah, totally. And then I want to get into the reason for that with some of the acupressure points in the feet anyways later on. But finish your story about the history of the toilet.
Yeah. So, I started looking it up and, dated back in history. At one point in time, the toilet was only reserved for kings and cripples. And like anything, we begin to idolize kings, and then it becomes part of modern culture. We want to poop like the king. And that's now led to, like you said, a global crisis where things like hemorrhoids and, colorectal cancer and so forth. And you can kind of look at charts over time and how the modern toilet being introduced in society. I mean, there are other variables as well, but, there is a correlation with, colorectal issues and the modern toilet. So I love what you're doing with the toilet at your new house and maybe avoiding some of the perch wipeouts, but I think that should be, as we're I guess as a true pooping professional, we should start to use some of that open source policy stuff I see out there to start advocating to lower our toilets in North America.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure the smartphone, the ability to be able to work from your phone from the throne, has not done folks any favors in the hemorrhoid department. I've even seen some gastroenterologists and other folks who advise. Actually, one of the people I was talking with about pelvic floor muscular tightness said, "Dude, just like try not to bring a bunch of work into the bathroom because it's only going to make the issue worse." In the same way, you shouldn't train your brain to associate your bed with work, like doing heavy laptop work or having business books in bed. You shouldn't train your brain to associate the toilet with work. For me, it's usually like I'll put on a podcast or an audiobook and then just jump into my thing. Now doing a lot of the stretches I learned from your book. But when I first heard you describe toilet yoga, Derek, I thought it was going to be like, okay, you go to the bathroom and maybe, with a yoga mat on the floor of the bathroom, you do a few stretches that kind of loosen things up and cause you to get a little loosey-goosey and ready to go do your thing. Then you walk over to the toilet and take a dump. But I read your book, is way different. You're actually doing these special stretches and positions while on the toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it was very. It wasn't something I learned. It was something that I would say that my body taught me by following just kind of my internal rhythm. And yeah, what it is, I mean, everybody who's taken a yoga class, I still like to go to hot yoga myself, but everybody who's probably taken yoga at some point or another has felt the need to pass gas in yoga when it's really, really quiet and calm. So the body's naturally trying to release, or maybe you have, I mean, so.
Oh my gosh, child's pose, down dog. There's certain positions that, this is another reason that I always make sure I have a good poop if I ever go to a yoga class, because otherwise it could be disaster.
Yeah. It's don't go. If it's a Wednesday following Taco Tuesday or something, I mean, it can really get crazy in the yoga class. But no, I mean, but the thing is too is like you talked to it earlier about the high achievers and hard chargers. Like we're in like this hustle culture, rush society where the only time that we ever go to the bathroom is when it's like a complete about to be a blowout or some type of massive emergent event, and we don't facilitate using the restroom like we would, as you described earlier, in a primal setting, or you're outside, you're squatting down, birds are chirping, sun's shining, there's trees around. It's a really, so I think we've really kind of gotten off track with it. But so the idea of that is that when you go into the bathroom, the body needs to feel safe. You need to try to bring the body into a parasympathetic state, really center the mind on what's happening here. It's kind of a sacred event where your body is detoxifying all the things that from your thoughts to your even the things that you ate, and trying to remove it from the body, and being able to facilitate yogic movements and breath work movements, and even things like even hitting some key reflex points and so forth to aid the body in this kind of in this primal circumstance of defecating.
Yeah, and what you say about the parasympathetic activation is really important. One tip I heard back in the day from a gut person who I interviewed was stare off into the distance, which is nice because I actually have a window in my bathroom and I can look out into the forest. I know some people who actually have nature photography or nature art in the bathroom to look at and kind of like just pensively redirect the eyes to, because it's very relaxing. I have even experimented with a couple of these vagal nerve stimulators. They actually hold up to the side of your neck and use to relax the body. Pro athletes will use these before like golf or shooting free throws or something like that. You can also use something like that as almost like a bathroom biohack to directly relax the vagus nerve. There's one called a V relief. You could just keep it right by the toilet and do a little bit of stim for about 2 minutes on the right side of the neck, 2 minutes on the left side of the neck, and it really relaxes the body. Another example would be a lot of these pelvic floor musculature relaxation professionals will advise you to do breath work that trains you how to properly breathe when you're pooping. So, for example, you'll get into like the yoga frog pose, not on the toilet, legs apart, kind of, chest or stomach facing the floor, and then you breathe. But as you breathe in, you imagine the anal sphincter kind of like opening like a flower. And then when you breathe out, you allow it to passively, actively do a Kegel and constrict it, but you allow it to kind of return back to a constricted position. And then you breathe in again and allow it to open. And then you breathe out and it relaxes and it kind of constricts. the idea here is that when you're on the toilet, when you breathe in, your diaphragm expands. That should naturally kind of like push stuff down a little bit. And if you at the same time imagine your anus kind of opening again like a flower, then that allows for better ease of defecation, especially when combined with something like a Squatty Potty or some of the moves you go into in the book. And then when you breathe out, you kind of relax everything. Or I'm sorry, when you breathe out, you kind of, you don't actively constrict, but you allow stuff to go from that open position to a slightly closed position. Then when you breathe in, it opens again and stuff comes out. So you've got, looking off into nature, vagal nerve stimulators, not doing business in the bathroom, breathing properly. But I want to hear a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of toilet yoga. Obviously, when people get the book, they'll be able to read through it and see the different stretches. And I liked the one page you have in the book somewhere. I actually have that one printed off and in the bathroom just for ease of reference. But go into some of these moves that you actually do once you're on the toilet, preferably with a Squatty Potty in the proper position. What happens next?
Yeah. So initially, one thing, in true biohacking nature, one thing I have added since the book is I set my red light panel up in front of the toilet now. So it's a really I'm just stacking it up even more. So I'll just blast myself with red light while I'm on the toilet. So it's another good hack.
My wife would die if I added my wife is very into feng shui. There's not a red light panel that's going to go anywhere near the master bathroom. I can put a tiny little, less than a cell phone sized vagal nerve stimulator on the shelf or keep it in the bathroom drawer. But with a red light sounds amazing. That'd be super relaxing.
Yeah. To dive into the actual practice. So the idea is the bathroom's that one place in our really busy life right now where we can actually get away and bring the body into a parasympathetic state. So the idea is what you would do is you find yourself on the toilet. Of course, you're using the Squatty Potty to get the body in the most primal position that you possibly can in the modern world. Then you begin to focus on your breathing. So we know from breath work and meditation that the breath can, slow and regulate the body in very unique ways. So the initial part is you focus on the breath, and there's a whole chapter in the book that takes everybody through a very kindergarten version of breath work and a way to bring the body to a parasympathetic state. But what we're trying to do there is get the body to relax and say, I'm safe in this environment. And that's a step within itself and something that yoga is a practice, but we want to make the body feel safe. So we first start focusing on the breath, getting the body centered, getting really in touch with every part of your body through the breath. And then the second portion of this is once we get centered in the breath, we begin to move through a sequence of yogic poses. And we start on the right-hand side of the body because we know the way digestion flows. And there's lots of charts within the body to show you how the digestive system works and different things around that. And you'll go through a series of modified yoga poses. So like a modified figure four, and then you'll actually bring that leg over. And all of this you're doing in cadence and sync with your breathing.
Like you're sitting cross-legged in a chair. So one foot is on the ground or preferably up on a Squatty Potty. And then it's like you're sitting cross-legged in a chair, correct?
Yeah. So anybody can do this, depending on your mobility. And so you begin to go through this yoga sequence with the stretches. And then we start to really stack it up. We start to marry the breath to specific regions of the body. We start to touch different trigger points and reflex points within the body that are all laid out in the book that are primarily succinct to aid you in having a bowel movement. And then we move into reflex points on the foot, where there are multiple reflex points on the foot that are directly linked to the colon and to the digestive system. And as you work through the practice and you start to press on those and you're dialed into your body, you will notice that they actually do stimulate different parts of the colon just through reflexology and the way the nervous system is directly tied from the feet to the enteric nervous system. So it's a combination of breath work, yoga, reflexology, some fascial maneuvers, and then you work through that practice, but tailor it all in.
Yeah, I didn't really believe you when you told me, and then I read in the book about literally just like sitting on the toilet. Again, the easiest way to think about this is like you're sitting cross-legged in a chair, And once you're sitting cross-legged, you've got access to whatever foot is propped up. So following the instructions in your book, I started to hit some of those points along the foot with my thumb, and stuff just starts to drop out of your butt. Like, it's crazy. It's like it opens the floodgates. And I think folks might think we're talking about some elaborate 30-minute routine. It's just 10 poses in the book. And, I don't even do all of right now. I do about 6 of them, right? I sit in one position, hunched over a little bit. I do the right figure 4. I do the left figure 4. I do the right pigeon. I do the left pigeon. And at that point, I'm pretty good to go. And I might have 1 or 2 minutes in each position. But yeah, the reflexology points on the foot, that's a game changer. And you know what else was super interesting? Again, I didn't believe you when you told me this. You said it gave you almost like a coffee enema type of effect, or this effect that like you've pooped and then there's still some inside and all of a sudden more comes out. And it was the use of the elbow, meaning when you're in the figure 4 position, let's say I have my right foot propped up on my left knee or thigh, that right elbow, you kind of drive it just a little bit into the area right around the ileocecal valve, like 2 inches or so to the right of the belly button. And all of a sudden, it just opens the floodgates. And then I started doing it on the left side as well. And that's a very cool move.
Yeah. And you nailed it. So, I mean, I think, possibly, you could be the most world-renowned person for coffee enemas and things up the butt. And
unfortunately,
well, I mean, I think we all have our own little private chapters of that. So, and I have, following your advice, I got into coffee enemas and, still use those from time to time, but to do it every day or, it's not super practical. But what I did find is that you get a very similar release by just, when you take the move and you do the reflexology and you follow the steps of the book, and then you get to where you're actually placing the elbow near that ileocecal valve. And so the liver's in there well. So we're kind of engaging the gallbladder, the liver. It kind of causes this flush throughout the digestive system. And as you said, things just start to come out much like they would for an enema. And when the colon is clean, that's the key behind the coffee enema. And Ayurvedic medicine has recognized this for thousands of years that like that, if you're feeling sluggish, if you're feeling slothy or off in general, the first place to look is the bowels. It's typically something off in the bowels. So when you get that flush, when you get that major release and you remove all that toxic waste from your body, I mean, your body lights up. And I haven't found, a cup of coffee or even a good nootropic that really feels as good as just a warm release of poop.
Yeah, the coffee enema thing is interesting. I agree. You can do it too much. Not only can you get excess turnover of the cellular lining in the colon and actually affect the bacterial composition of the colon by doing it excessively, but it can cause dehydration, mineral loss, etc. if you're using any form of an enema too much, particularly some of the harsh, like over-the-counter enemas that you would get from say like Walgreens or CVS. Now, for me, especially if I do international travel or hefty amounts of travel, I actually still need to use one of those over-the-counter enemas occasionally. Like, for example, I did just got back from Europe, and I had 2 6-hour flights and 2 9-hour flights. And for the longer flights, I will often use a Valium to sleep, and Valium can be very constipating. So when I get to my final destination, I don't necessarily travel with a full coffee enema kit, but I'll sometimes use one of those portable enemas to actually just get stuff moving along, restart the bowel movement, and then get on and pass the pharmaceutical-induced constipation. But the coffee enema, it's not necessarily just for constipation, right? You get a huge release of glutathione and bile from the liver and the gallbladder. You get enormous amounts of peristalsis that move stuff along in a far different way than just doing something like toilet yoga. And yeah, you even, as you know, you get a little bit of a caffeine high as well, and you feel incredible. So I do once a week, I do a coffee enema. I lay on my left side. I usually add butyrate to it. I add probiotics to it, and I add a little bit of olive oil to it, right? So I'm nourishing my colonic flora and kind of lubing up the tubes a little bit, so to speak, with breaking open a butyrate capsule, breaking open a couple of probiotic capsules, putting about a tablespoon of olive oil all into lukewarm coffee and then doing the enema. And that's great, but you don't want to do that every day, as you just noted. So the idea of that elbow against the ileocecal valve when you're in that cross-legged position works really well. But you also do what I often hear recommended, and what I do myself as well, either before or during the act of defecation, moving using like the palm or a percussion gun works, or a handheld massage device, kind of up the right side, across, over to the left side, down the left side, and then back over, kind of tracing the path of the colon.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea it lays out in the book is that you actually can take your hands and start to make this massage track along the gastrointestinal tract, and we do that later in the practice in the book, because the idea is that you're kind of moving things along, through the first part of the practice, and then as we start to wrap up, we do some nice gentle massaging. And what I found is like there's either gas or debris, like once you start to move things out that are left behind. And I also, feel like it's kind of opening up that fascial layer and all that lymph that's in that area now that it's, kind of cleansed out. But there's a really nice, sequence and routine to do that. And I found it very helpful. And if you look at, and there's reflex points laid out in the book, but there's a ton of them that are in that specific region. So as you're going through and you're using your body to actually connect your hands to different areas, it's very alleviating, if you will, as to any type of after poop that would be left in the tract, if that's even a word. After poop, that I may have to call Webster on that one.
It's kind of like they call stem cells, birth waste or afterbirth products.
Yeah.
You call the poop the after poop.
And then I like to do, like tapping is a big thing. Like I tap in the mornings and, jump up and down on my feet, and I do all the, the weird things, stand on one, stand upside down on one finger kind of thing. But if I kind of incorporate some tapping along there as well, just to kind of tap the bowel area, and some just some percussion to that area to just kind of stimulate the nervous system and any of the reflex points that are in that area. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that we can do to kind of stimulate digestion and clean things out to get that really nice flush from a bowel standpoint. I love the idea of the Theragun. So I want to come back to two things you said. The Theragun is a great idea. I wouldn't bury it in there, but I think having it would be a really good thing to kind of massage and get things loosened up.
Yeah, to interrupt you real quick with something like a percussion gun, yeah, you've got vital organs. You don't want to go super deep, in the same way that if you're doing psoas massage or something like that, what's that device, the Songwriter, you don't want to go super hard and super deep. But a lot of these guns come with a head on them that's kind of like a blade, like a shovel blade used for scraping. And that's the one that I like to use. I go with real light pressure. And again, just follow and this is usually before I sit down on the toilet. I do it for about 1 or 2 minutes, and I feel like it really jump starts the process.
I totally agree. And that's kind of my thing in the morning. I will typically, as I'm doing my tapping routines in the morning, I'll move down, and if my body calls for it, I'll really spend more time, kind of going through that, going over my digestive tract in that manner. But you make a good point too. So another thing we talk about, there's rhythms in certain times of the day that you should be pooping. Like if you look at the Ayurvedic clock, you should be pooping every morning before 11 a.m. And if you look at, that's something that's been validated throughout history for thousands of years, because we are, we're creatures of the earth. We're linked to this natural circadian rhythm, and our bodies are actually designed to remove waste and things in alignment with circadian rhythm. So when you said, I love that, that's like the ultimate biohack. I'm going to actually go get some from CVS now. But when you are going across time zones, and then actually when you get there, you make sure that you empty out the colon. I think that's just, could be just as important for the body's natural clock as like, some of the other crazy stuff that we do, like wearing the blue light glasses or doing the retimers and that kind of stuff. So it's really just synchronizing your system. So I like that. I'll have to run up and see if I can find some of those Procter and Gamble flushes.
I think it's Fleet makes them. They're probably going to sell out. They're probably going to sell out after the show. But yeah, Fleet makes like a little mini enema that works fine for travel, which is probably one of the biggest causes of constipation in a lot of people, because you're combining sympathetic nervous system stress with typically lower fiber intake, an impact on the flora of the gut, especially if it's long haul travel, and then having to poop outside of your normal time zones, because there is, as you've just noted, an intricate link between body clock and time of defecation. Like for me, if my schedule's set up exactly the way I want to any given day, I'm like clockwork about 7:30, 7:45 or so. Like that's my poop time. And typically by then I've been up for a couple hours. I've had water, I've stretched, I've had my quiet time, my devotions. I've done the morning family huddle. This isn't something I'm doing like within 20 minutes after I get up. Again, unless I'm traveling, I just got to go right when I get up. But yeah, the body clock piece is important. And I'm a two-a-dayer. I'm typically about 7:30, 7:45 a.m. And then like clockwork, sometime between 3 and 4 p.m., like every single day. And the morning, I realize, this might be gross to some people, but this is just, two dudes shooting shit. My morning, I literally fill the toilet bowl. And in the afternoon, I still go again, and I do have a decent amount of fiber, water. I take care of myself. But for me, it's twice a day, like clockwork.
Yeah, same for me. Like I'm between 7:30, 8 a.m., maybe 8:15. And then there's always an afternoon poop. And like, once you start to dial in your pooping and you realize like how much waste your body's putting out, like I really feel bad for people who are not pooping every day, at least once. Because there's a thing I cover in the book, and I think it's what a lot of people are dealing with out there. And myself, I was too, is like, it's this idea of incomplete emptying. So you run to the bathroom, you take a quick poop, and basically you just remove what's in the rectum. You really don't, like, the colon is this whole intricate, large system, as we discussed earlier, but you're just dropping out a few pebbles and then you're on with your day. And what happens is when that poop stays in the digestive system, it's toxic, starts to leak back into the body. So, we know there's a gut-brain connection. So I'm not saying there's any link between this and mental health or mood, but for me particularly, if I've got, still some toxins in the kitchen, if you will, that I need to get out, I feel off that day. So I actually kind of schedule my day a lot around my pooping. Like if I have to get up and hustle and miss my morning poop, or, it kind of throws everything else off. And I, allude that to, there's toxins that are coming to the body and creating this little bit of agitation and just, sympathetic response.
Yeah, I totally agree. You don't know how many times I've turned down an 8 a.m. meeting because I'm like, well, no, I'm going to be pooping right then. And I don't like to go through half my day with feeling like I'm holding in a bunch of fecal matter. And even that idea of colonic reabsorption of toxins is a thing. And so complete elimination is important. That's the worst feeling, Derek, is like, because I go to the gym at like 8:15, 8:30. Right. So I got my morning poop, and the next thing is the gym. The worst thing is going into the gym, getting 5 minutes into your workout and realizing, oh, crap, literally and figuratively, I had an incomplete elimination. And then you're just kind of like half distracted during the workout, and you finish and you got to go try and squeeze it in before the rest of your day. So yeah, I agree. Paying attention to complete elimination and knowing what that feels like, especially for the morning bowel movement, is so important.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing is, Ben, and that's one of the things I want, try to go through in the book, is getting people to just recognize the feeling. And once they recognize it, the body will anchor that feeling, and you'll be going to the bathroom, like you won't be thinking about it. It just starts to happen like clockwork. And we talk about hustle culture again, and I always, think about like, I'm not opposed to this whole, like, getting up at 4 a.m. and, running but if you jump up and you're like running from lions and you don't poop, I don't know how much good you're doing by getting up and hustling that early in the morning. I think the mornings should be reserved for removing toxins of the body and so forth. So I'm sure there's, someone like our friend Jocko who may come like, throw me off a ladder or something like from a wrestling match but that, like, I would like to caution anybody that's like getting up and doing that, like, where are you making time to poop? And there's so many people out there these days. And I'll say that Ben Greenfield is the one guy on the internet that I found who doesn't mind talking about poop, because there's so many social influencers out there. It's like, I wake up at 6:30. I get up, I brush my teeth standing on one foot. I'm doing the red light panel. I drink, 3 gallons of water, and they never tell you when they poop.
Exactly, dude. That it drives me nuts. Yeah, I'm like, what kind of princess are you? And then it's like, if you were going to poop, I just looked at your schedule. If you squeeze it in there and didn't mention the schedule, you're literally getting in and out within 5 minutes. And if that's the case, lucky you, congratulations. You're getting complete elimination with all these other elaborate parts of your morning routine within 5 minutes. But I mean, for me, 20 to 30 minutes, like for complete elimination, feeling really good, getting all done, doing the stretching, wiping, post stretching, meaning that the hip flexors tend to be very tight after a bowel movement, right? So there's typically 1 or 2 minutes of stretching each hip flexor afterwards. So when I say like 7:45 poop time, that means I'm out of the bathroom at 8:15 preparing for the workout. But yeah, like it shocks me when I see people describe their elaborate morning routines. I think the same thing, Derek. I'm like, dude, when do you take a dump?
Yeah, you nailed it. Like it's like so I'll do a toilet yoga routine, and like you said, you don't have to be in there for it doesn't have to be this elaborate 75-minute yoga session, but like let's go through the routine, and I'll typically stand up and as if I were squatting in the woods, took a little poop, stood up, kind of going through and like let the body kind of recalibrate. And once you do that, you could be in the bathroom for 20, 30 minutes. It doesn't mean you're just sitting there just barreled down, straining on the toilet. But I think that, I would like to advocate for people at least carving the, self-respect, try to give yourself 15 minutes in the bathroom and just see what happens. Like, how do you feel? Like, how can you be disconnected for that long?
Yeah. What I do from a calendaring standpoint is I schedule 30 minutes for morning detoxification, bowel movement, and stretching. And some days I'm in and out within 15 minutes. But the last thing I want is to like schedule a phone call at 8 a.m., know that my bathroom time is 7:45, and then, I'm like scrambling and feel like crap again, literally and figuratively during the phone call because I've just like only made it halfway through my bowel movement. So I think, schedule yourself. And I do realize that tasks will sometimes fill to the time allotted. You want to be careful with that. But I find if I make sure I've given myself 30 minutes for my morning bathroom time, typically 15 minutes for my afternoon time, I'm good.
Yeah, no, there's nothing more annoying than, cutting it off short and having a turtle head trying to poke out when you're trying to perform on a call or a podcast or something. So like my thing is like, it's like, how can I show up most centered to that? And I've begun to kind of just like you, I build my day around, if I want to bring my best self to a meeting or to a podcast or music or my family, it comes from first me taking care of myself from a detoxification and stretching standpoint. So I love that you have that in your practice, and I love that you share it. So I think, I always look at the schedules and I'm like, there is no way, like that guy, like I need to go learn something from them that they're doing. Like, how are they just opening this thing up, that quickly?
Yeah, I've got clients, many of whom I've helped through constipation issues they didn't even realize they were struggling with. I'll talk to them like, yeah, I poop, once every couple of days, or like I go through the whole day and then I kind of have a little poop before dinner, and I'll change up the routine and, have them doing some magnesium at night, some light stretching or Tai Chi or Qigong, or jumping up and down on his trampoline upon waking, paired with a large glass of water, going into the bathroom, making sure they know how to stretch, move their hip flexors, get on the toilet. And for people who don't know what it actually feels like to be walking around with empty bowels, it's a game changer emotionally, physically, mentally. You're just more clear.
I totally agree. I think once it's open, like, and this is all, like I have a clinical background, so I don't want to say like this is all like medical advice, but this is like intuitive knowledge from working with the body. Is like once the bowels are clear and the liver is actually able to secrete bile and do all the things that it does, it just, the whole system starts to purify. And that typically for me, that results in like my cognition's better. Everything is pretty much better across the board. And, and it's, a lot of people don't get it. My wife in particular, we live in the same home, and she thought I was crazy for a long time. She's like, what are you in there doing for 30 minutes? I'm like, I don't have my phone in there. I don't have a magazine out. And she's like, I can poop in like 2 minutes. And I was like, you're just not fully defecating. So, of course, I didn't force it on her. It's kind of that whole the shoemaker's rationale. But now that she does, she's like, you're onto something. So, like, I slowly try to convert my family.
Yeah, the shoemaker's wife wears no shoes. I think also, again, I don't want to stereotype. I don't know if your wife is like mine, but I work a job that is heavily calendared from like 5 a.m. until 7 p.m. Therefore, I can't just say, oh, I'm just going to poop when it's time to poop. Because like right now, talking to you, walking on the treadmill, I might just be super distracted by having to poop. So especially if you have a heavily scheduled calendar, then it actually does really make sense to not just say, hey, I'm going to poop. It doesn't make sense to say I'm going to poop when I'm going to poop, because that might be during one of your scheduled events. Instead, you say, okay, I'm going to get it all done with early in the day, possibly have a quick repeat trip in the afternoon, as long as you know approximately. Usually the afternoon is not as big of a deal to squeeze in between calls or whatever. But yeah, I mean, part of it is that, if you have the total freedom of schedule to just say, yo, I'm going to poop when nature calls, that might be 11 a.m., it might be 1 p.m., whatever. But based on circadian rhythmicity, body clock, scheduling, and productivity, I think it's just best to have your scheduled time in the morning and get it done.
I completely agree. And to dive in a little deeper on something you just said about the afternoon poop. So understanding that there's 37 trillion microbiota, in our gut that's, talking with the brain and all this sensory stuff going on. I noticed that when I take that afternoon poop and I have feel like I have a clean colon, I'm able to, from a satiation standpoint with dinner, I'm able to enjoy my meal more. I'm more in touch with even to the top of the digestive system on the tongue. I'm able to taste and enjoy my meal more because it's, and my thought around it is that there's nothing down there distracting me from being fully present with what I'm partaking in now. So I love having it, doing it before a meal. It just helps me feel more focused and more connected to my food.
Totally. Sitting down to eat a good meal while still having to poop is just one of the suckiest things in the world. You mentioned something that I don't want to necessarily neglect to get a little clarification on because my listeners might have been confused. You said tapping. Are you literally just tapping the gut, or is there a specific type of tapping that you're doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, my first journey in tapping started with just kind of tapping over the sinuses, up and down the face, patting. So the way that I do that on the gut is I actually try to focus on the tips of the fingers. So as I'm actually intentionally doing this, and it lays it out in the book, but I start on the right quadrant again, somewhere over that ileocecal valve. And I just start to kind of tap over those areas, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over those particular areas. And then I'll take the tapping down to more, rather than hovering and kind of doing this spider-like motion over the gut. And then I'll actually move that into more of like we show in the book, we're actually doing some clockwise rotation. So that's the kind of the way that I do that. And I noticed, Ben, that a lot of times, with the sticky poop and just, it's surprising how much gas is in the gastrointestinal system as well. So it really helps get off any of that excess flatulence that may be in there. You got to think I think of it if you have this huge cylinder that's clogged up with stuff and you move it out, obviously there's some free space there as the peristalsis starts to kind of, take back control, and the colon and the gut start to kind of squeeze back to its natural place. There's a little bit of air that can be caught there. So I find the tapping is very, very, very nice for that part of the practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you get into a lot of details in the book, all the way down to toilet paper. You even had a non-toxic brand. I didn't realize there were, I knew tampons were toxic. I think, it was Aubrey Marcus. I was doing a podcast with him. He called them, pardon the expression, pussy cigarettes. But the idea behind tampons is, of course, concerning because that's an area where there's a large amount of capillary absorption. The rectal has capillaries. I never thought about the chemicals in toilet paper, but it's actually a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about it, I always go back and I kind of joke because, like I said, I'm quite notorious for things up the butt as well. And and so just to paint it into context, from a medical background, in Western medicine, we typically will go to something like some type of suppository form of something for nausea, like a Zofran or something. But even in the biohacking world, if we look at guys like John Lawrence, who has a whole host of suppository style products, and it is because it's highly absorptive, when you go into the rectum. So you take that same principle and you think about toilet paper and all of these chemicals and stuff that you're over the course of your life. How many times have you touched your butthole essentially with toxic toilet paper that could be absorbed right back into the body? So, it's, compound interest, if you will, around toilet paper can cause extreme risk. So, that's a big factor, touching that area. And you'll notice too in the practice, there's, we actually talk about the rectum And a lot of, there's so many like little sensory things within the rectum to whereas if you touch it in some specific way, it causes the body to either defecate or you notice a sensation from it. So yeah, I think that toxic toilet paper poses a small threat to us all by just over the use of exposure. And like take it for instance, I mean like a diaper, like they make non-toxic diapers, and I always say like if they're making something non-toxic, that means there's a toxic version of it. So that's point in case.
Yeah, I think Reel is the brand you mentioned in the book, REEL.
Yeah, no affiliation with them. Yeah, and I've been known to like you said, I grew up hunting and stuff, so I've used my fair share of I think what would be best is something like like an oak leaf or something like that out in the woods. But in a primal nature would have used something like that. But it really changes the game once you get really dialed into the body about using Reel and like bamboo. Reel's a bamboo toilet paper, so I noticed it being really really nice for cleanup.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Dude Wipes brand. Not only because it just kind of looks cool by the toilet, the man's throne with his Dude Wipes, but there's like minty fresh. You don't flush them, even though they say they're flushable. I don't flush them. I just have a waste basket, like one of those similar to like a diaper can next to the toilet, and I just toss them in there. Those work pretty well for cleaning you up pretty quickly. Now, one other thing I wanted to ask you was you talked towards the end of the book, Derek, you mentioned the toilet paper thing. You mentioned staying well hydrated. You mentioned avoiding toxic ingredients, fasting, chewing and eating in a calm state. But I didn't see you talk about a nighttime supplementation. Like I'm a huge fan of magnesium oxide or like more forms of magnesium like magnesium breakthrough. I actually take like a double dose because I find that it really helps me go to the bathroom. And then when I travel, I use Triphala, which is the Indian Ayurvedic herb formulation at night, again, because I find pooping harder when I travel. Do you take any nighttime or morning supplements to move things along?
Yeah. So, I say digestion starts in the morning. So I can kind of walk you through like, kind of my morning water. My morning water is, it's got all setting up for flushing. So I use, there's a product that Thorne has called Cinequil, and it kind of has like, glutathione and ketones. And I use a little bit of it. I use some C60. I use molecular hydrogen, and all this is all like a 32-ounce glass of water. And I'll down that in the morning to kind of get things going and stimulate the digestion.
I do the same thing, by the way. Now, I use hydrogen, vitamin C, and lukewarm water because lukewarm really helps. So I'm the same thing, 32 ounces, massive mug when I get up.
Well, I have to give a shameless plug, that is Greenfield structured water that I drink in the morning. So I've got one of the Greenfield water systems structured under the sink, and I'll get that thing going and vortex it in the morning. And it's kind of, so I set up the digestive ritual starting in the morning. And then, like you said, like in the afternoon, like usually around dinner, I'll start, depending on how my digestion feels, I'll use like the Triphala. And then I consistently use Mag Breakthrough. Like it's been a staple in my diet for years. And I use the digestive enzymes from Bioptimizers as well. And I have no affiliation with Bioptimizers, but their stuff just works. And a lot of people, as we talk about, there's a whole chapter in the book on toxic load. And as if you use some of the things that like the Bioptimizers products for HCl, like the HCl Breakthrough is part of my routine. And that helps with moving, all those things through the system. So my stack is typically, the digestive enzymes from Bioptimizers. I use their Mag Breakthrough, and I also use the Keon Lean really helps too for me. I use it before meals, so I actually love that. And I've noticed that a change in my digestion with the Keon Lean. So I don't know what you have in there, but I have an idea, but I think it actually helps with reducing, like if there's any type of parasites or candida. I don't know if you've ever looked into that, but from my knowledge, I feel like it's helping with any of that overgrowth that could be in there, like a maintenance thing.
Yeah, Keon Lean is comprised mostly of things that support healthy blood sugar management. Notice how I said that properly for the FDA. And bitter melon is one of the components of it, which can also have theoretically things like anti-parasitic activity or assisting with digestion, et cetera, because it's bitter, right? And you also made a good point. If you eat an appreciable amount of protein, which you should, taking protein digestive enzymes, especially if you're after the age of about 40, because your pancreatic enzyme production will decrease. That's also something that can help with bowel movements. You mentioned you take HCl to help with stomach acid production and protein and nutrient assimilation after eating. I'm more of like a shot of apple cider vinegar guy for something like that, which is pretty easy. And then the last thing I'll give a shout out to is something called TUDCA, which improves bile flow and assists with liver function. And I now take a capsule of TUDCA with dinner. The company Level Up Health, they have a fantastic, for anybody who has gut issues, their gut repair formula is incredible. But they also have a super like maximum strength TUDCA that you take. The first time he sent it to me, I took it and kind of gross, but I said I filled the toilet bowl a little bit ago. This time it was like almost to the point where I couldn't sit on the toilet without hitting my own poo. I filled the toilet bowl so much. So TUDCA, be careful. It will completely clean you out, but just one capsule. And again, I like the Level Up Health stuff. It's incredible as an addition for liver and gallbladder.
I'll have to jump in the pulpit with you right here and high five you and begin to preach too. So I just, being with looking at my methylation status and knowing about, how my body handles toxins, I just, I did some recent testing and noticed that my mercury levels and my mold levels were starting to kind of creep back up again. And so I introduced TUDCA into the diet. Wow. I mean, it's a complete game changer for me. Like I noticed, a demonstrable difference probably in the last 4 to 6 weeks since I've started taking it. But it really helps. And I mean, I'm using some other things as well, just like little mild binders and like using some black seed oil. But in particular, like the star of the show has been TUDCA. And actually, like, I feel like I could, if you've ever done like, I'll say if you've ever done, if anybody out there has ever done something like EBU or ozone therapy, when you actually clean out the blood, the first time I did it, I felt like I felt my whole, my liver and my spleen, they all felt like they were like just radiating with like just purity. And I get a very milder effect of that from TUDCA just using it daily. So I think it's a game changer for anybody out there. I would totally recommend giving it a try. It's helped me tremendously.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The book, Toilet Yoga, Biohack Your Bowel Movement. Pretty pink color, which is relaxing, according to that old book called Drunk Tank Pink. They paint the drunk tanks in prison, isolation tanks in prison pink because it's calming. Your book is calming, so maybe even keeping Derek's book in the bathroom and not even reading it will help you to poop. But I will link to Derek's book, everything else we talked about in this show, all the resources at bengreenfieldlife.com/toilet yoga, where you can also leave your own comments, questions, feedback, etc. And I'd be happy to check them out. I usually read all the comments because I really like to see what you guys think and interact with you there. So bengreenfieldlife.com/toilet yoga. And Derek, thanks so much, man. It was an incredible chat and super fun shooting the shit with you.
You beat me to the punchline. Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate you, brother.
All right, later, folks. I'm Ben Greenfield, along with Derek Norsworthy, author of Toilet Yoga, signing out from bengreenfieldlife.com. Have an incredible week.
Do you want free access to comprehensive show notes, my weekly roundup newsletter, cutting-edge research and articles, top recommendations from me for everything that you need to hack your life, and a whole lot more? Check out bengreenfieldlife.com. It's all there. bengreenfieldlife.com. See you over there. Most of you who listen don't subscribe, like, or rate this show. If you're one of those people who do, then huge thank you. But here's why it's important to subscribe, like, and or rate this show. If you do that, that means we get more eyeballs, we get higher rankings, and the bigger the Ben Greenfield Life Show gets, the bigger and better the guests get, and the better the content I'm able to deliver to you. So hit subscribe, leave a ranking, leave a review if you got a little extra time. It means way more than you might think. Thank you so much.